Welcome to the basics of photography. I will be showing you the basic functions of your camera and give you a few tips along the way. Welcome to the basics of photography. I will be showing you the basic functions of your camera and give you a few tips along the way. If you are a beginner, you are probably unsure how to use your camera properly. My first advice is to look at your camera manual. It is full of information for your camera. If you are a beginner, you are probably unsure on how to use your camera properly. My first advice is to look at your camera manual. It is full of information that is needed for your camera. The best place to start is with your shooting modes. Depending on your camera, your shooting modes will be found on a dial at the top labeled with automatic, AV, P, M, and TV. Some cameras have more. The best place to start is with your shooting modes. Depending on your camera, your shooting modes will be found on a dial at the top labeled with Auto, AV, TV, P, and M. I have a Canon Rebel, and mine are labeled right at the top. As a matter of fact, I have a couple of more labels going across the top of my dial. So depending on your camera, you may have more or it may just have those 5. Some cameras have more. When you choose a shooting mode, it determines how your camera will react to you pressing the shutter button. If you shoot in automatic mode, which is usually represented by a green box, the camera chooses all the settings for you and takes the best picture for the scene that you're in. This is the only mode where you don't have to set any settings. I am using a Canon Rebel T3i, so my dial may look a little different from your dial, depending on which camera you're using, but the functions all function in the same way. The next shooting mode that I will be talking about is the aperture priority mode. This mode can be thought of as a semi-automatic mode. You set the aperture and the camera will automatically put in the settings for your shutter speed. Aperture is the size of the opening in the lens, where the light is allowed to pass through. The larger the aperture hole, the more light passes through. The smaller the hole, the less light passes through. The aperture is measured by f-stops and is usually displayed as f2.0 or f2.8 or f5.0 or etc. The larger the f-stop number, the larger the hole, and the larger the f-stop number, the smaller the hole. Shutter priority is very similar to aperture. You set the shutter speed and the camera will set the aperture. The shutter speed determines the amount of time the shutter stays open when you are shooting a photograph. The longer the shutter stays open, the more light that passes through. If you wanted to freeze a fast-moving object such as sports, you could use a short shutter speed. If you want to blur a moving object, you would want to use a longer shutter speed number. I would suggest using a tripod. The last 2 settings that I'm going to talk about are program mode and manual mode. Program mode, you are able to set either the aperture or shutter speed. If you set the aperture, the camera will adjust the shutter speed. If you set the shutter speed, the camera will adjust the aperture. As for the manual mode, it is exactly what it says. It gives you full control over the exposure.